are forgiven. Skip down to verse 11. I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home. And immediately he rose, picked up his bed, and went out before them all, so that they were amazed and glorified God, saying, we've never saw anything like this. Let me recapitulate that verse number 5. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, thy sins are forgiven thee. You may be seated in the presence of our good and gracious God. The grass withers and the flowers do fall, but the word of our God do stand forever. And he rose and immediately picked up his bed and went out before them all. And so they were amazed and said, we've never saw anything like this. I want to talk from these words of preaching on tonight: good trouble, necessary trouble. Good trouble, necessary trouble. If you would be so kind, look at your neighbor to your left or your right, smile at them, don't scare them, and say, neighbor, the pastor going to preach about good trouble, necessary trouble. Give the Lord a hand clap of praise for us. It was around this time a couple of years ago, the world in the United States of America commemorized and memorialized a man who was a foot soldier and pioneer for justice and fought against inequality. He was a man short in stature, a man who had a lot of strength. And so many of the rights and privileges that are afforded to us can be attributed to him. And individuals who sat down at lunch counters, rode on buses, marched, protest, went to jail, and were martyred for the sake of desegregation and exercising the right to vote. Congressman John Lewis was that individual, a prolific and prophetic individual who was aware and conscious towards the plight and position of many individuals. During a speech, he declared, do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year, but it is a struggle of a lifetime. Never be afraid to make some noise, but get in good trouble, necessary trouble. And regardless of our age or stage of our lives, we are encouraged and entitled to get into some good trouble and some necessary trouble. When you see that there are lumps and pain inside of your body, you are entitled and encouraged to get into some good and necessary trouble, to ensure that you go to treatment and adhere to your doctor's guidelines so that you can fight against some cancer. When you see that you are treated as a punching bag, dealing with confronting circumstances that will leave you beaten up, battered up, and bruised up, you are encouraged and entitled to get into some good and necessary trouble, to walk away and get away so you won't be a victim of domestic violence. When you see injustice around you by the hand of individuals that are condoning white supremacy, banning immigrants from the country and separating immigrant families from their children, from their families, and have no plan for affordable health care and doing everything that they can to stifle us, you got to have some good trouble and necessary trouble to get off of your blessed assurance and go vote. Sometimes good trouble is godly trouble, but sometimes you got to break something so that God can bless some things. And as we walk through the dialogue and discourse of our current pericope, Jesus has re-entered into an area called Capernaum. It is here that he is possibly at the home of Simon Peter. And when they heard that Jesus was at his house, an uninvited group of people came inside of a house, and this house was packed what does Jesus does? He took advantage of the opportunity and he preaches the gospel. And may I tell you, my brothers and sisters, that wherever you are, wherever your position and wherever your station, you ought to use that place as a place to tell somebody about the goodness of Jesus. If you're in Walmart, tell them about Jesus. If you're at the city hall, tell them about Jesus. Wherever you are, you ought to tell somebody about Jesus. He's preaching, he's proclaiming, and he's sharing the good news. But while he's preaching in the house, the Bible said that there is a problem. There were a group of individuals who has a friend that is paralyzed, and they want Jesus to heal his friend. And however, they cannot, because there is a crowd between them and him. And my brothers and sisters, if you don't get nothing out of the sermon tonight, here's the sermon in one sentence. Here's the sermon in one sentence. When there is no way, you got to create a way. Preach, Pastor, I'm doing the best I can on a Wednesday night. That when there is no way, you got to create a way. But can I push it tonight? If you want to understand how you got to get into some good trouble and necessary trouble, you got to first of all understand that first and foremost, there must be risky collaboration. Let the church say risky collaboration. Notice in this text that this man was paralyzed. And by this man being paralyzed, that means he had an issue that was a result of a disease or part of his nervous system. Some would suggest that he was enfeebled by a paralytic stroke. His condition was so bad that he had to be cared for and carried by others. But yet, with determination and persistence, these men were adamant about getting their friend to Jesus. And so they did what they could. They couldn't heal him, so they took him to the one that could heal. They couldn't cure him, so they took him to the one that could cure. And with cooperation and collaboration, they were going to get their friend to Jesus. You just missed them. They couldn't heal him. They couldn't cure him. But with cooperation and collaboration, they took their friend to Jesus Christ. And oh, my brother and my sister, if you're going to work together in the Lord's work, you cannot do it sitting there being selfish and being stagnant. You got to work together so that so many souls can be saved. I tell you, my brothers, you can't do the Lord's work by yourself. It takes a team and collaborative effort. And I tell you, my brothers and sisters, if you want God to move in your life, if you want God to move in your business, if you want God to move in your church and make some moves and make some move, you got to obey his will for your life. You got to be on one accord, be united, be partners, and say that we can help our friends, help our family, help our co-worker, help somebody that's down the street get to Jesus Christ, in the words of Malcolm X, by any means necessary. So first and foremost, you got to understand it's a risky collaboration. But can I push it some more? You understand that a good trouble, necessary trouble, requires you to be creative. Let the church say, be creative. Now, there's tension in the text, Pastor Todd. The tension is this. These men ran into an obstacle. I'm not lying, it's in the text. Go with me to verse number 4. And when they could not get him near because of the crowd, here's what happened. They removed the roof above him. And when they had made an opening, they let down the bed on which the paralytic lay. These men ran into an obstacle. They ran into a situation. They ran into a problem. They could not get to Jesus because of a crowd. But I want to suggest that where there was an obstacle, they created an opportunity. Woo, y'all miss y'all shout cue. Where there was an obstacle, they created an opportunity. And since the crowd halted them from getting to Jesus, they said, that's okay. We're going to be creative in getting our friend to Jesus. Because again, where there is no way, you got to create a way. So what they did is they carried their friend up the stairs. They dug through the roof because roofs were flat. Beaten earth or rubble was underneath, and it was paved with brick, stone, or any other hard substance. And they dug through the roof, made a hole big enough to let their friend down so that Jesus could get to him. Because when it seemed as though it was impossible, they made it possible. When it seemed like it was an obstacle, they made an opportunity. Where it seemed like it was a setback, it made it a set up. And may I tell you, my brothers and my sisters, if you don't get nothing out of the sermon on tonight, you got to be willing to step out on faith, create an opportunity, and do your part. Is there anybody up in here that could testify that I got something that God is trying to do for me, and I got to step out and step on faith, create an opportunity, do my part so that the Lord can move in my life? And may I tell somebody, if you want to start the book, write the book. If you want to start the business, develop the plan. If you want to get the job, go ahead and fill out the application. If you want to go back to school or go back to college, you better fill out the application, go out to scholarships and do the necessary thing to complete the course that you got to do. You got to do, in the words of Tommy off of Rockford, you got to do what a human being got to do. You got to do what you got to do to get what you need done from the Lord. Is there anybody up in here that say that, Pastor, I know you said about a book, a business, and a job and going back, but it might be you might have a situation in your body where you need healing. Just go ahead and just pray and go to the doctor. If you may be some other situation where you got a wayward child or somebody, just go to Jesus and pray on about it. All I'm telling somebody up in here is do what you got to do so that you can get what you need. So first and foremost, again, this was a risky collaboration. Secondly, it requires you to be creative. But the third thing, unfortunately, there's some more tension in this text. There is ridiculous criticism. Lord have mercy. Let the church say ridiculous criticism. Just cut me up a little bit in the mics for a second. It was ridiculous criticism. Watch this. How was it? Because verse number 5 said, and when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, son, your sins are forgiven. Now some of the scribes were sitting there questioning their heart, why does this man speak like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And immediately Jesus, perceiving in the spirit that they thus questioned within themselves, said to them, why do you question these things in your heart? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven, or to say, rise, take up your bed and walk? Let me stop. After they did what they did to get their friend to Jesus, the Bible said that Jesus saw their faith. He saw their faith and he extended forgiveness. Diseases and death were attributed to the consequences of a man's sinful condition, and healing was predicated on God's forgiveness. Before Jesus healed the man, he forgave the man. He let go and release what was wrong with him so that he could correct it and make it right. And before I go any further, let me tell somebody that if the Lord to forgive you of something, you got to be willing to let it go so that he could correct it and make it right. But that's another sermon for another day. So when the Pharisees and scribes heard what Jesus said, they internally said that only God can forgive sins. And this man was perpetrating. This man was blaspheming. And I discovered that when you're doing something for God, there's always going to be somebody. I wish I had a witness here. There's always going to be somebody that's going to try their best to find some kind of fault and some kind of criticism within it. But guess what? I love when folk be critical. I love when folk cause opposition, Because whenever folk cause opposition, that showcase God's opportunity that he's getting ready to work. So whatever they may say on you at your job, let you go ahead and take it. Whatever you got going at your house, go ahead and take it. Because even though they oppose you, they just don't know that they're setting them up to see God perform a miracle inside of your life. And I discovered that people will oppose and get agitated because they don't know God themselves. And sometimes God got to use that negativity. They got to use that toxicity to let them know that even though you negative, something good is about to come out of this. So don't worry about your critics. Don't worry about criticism. Because guess what? Jesus will confront them. Woo! God Almighty. Don't worry about your critics. Don't worry about your criticism. Why? Because Jesus will confront it. How's that? Because in verse 10, but that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. And he said, this is where we're going next. And this last thing, and I'm done. But can I push it one last time? Last thing, I'm done. Risky collaboration. Required to be creative. But the last thing, and I'm done, and then it's this. You have ridiculous criticism, but here it is. There will be radical celebration. Can I push it in this place tonight? There'll be radical celebration. How is that? Because in the previous verses, I just told you that they tried to criticize and be critical of this man's deliverance. They tried to be critical of this man's forgiveness. But what Jesus does is he confronts them, silences them, and shows them that he is exactly who he is. I heard the saying that sometimes if you need proof about something, you just got to go ahead and look and you'll see for yourself. And so the Bible says that Jesus gives them proof and he demonstrates his power. He tells this man, arise, take up your bed, and go home. All Jesus did was speak a word to this man's situation. And the Bible said, as a result of his word, the man took the very thing that he was laying on, put it on his shoulders, and he began to start walking. And all I want to tell somebody is that the very thing that he couldn't do, he's now doing. Can't you see him? He was once laying there on his bed. But now the Lord have put that bed, allowed him to put that bed on. And every time you see him walking, it's a reflection that the Lord still performs miracles. And may I tell somebody, put me in E flat, I'm ready to go on home, that when the Lord have transformed and changed your life, he will do something that you never done before and show critics that the Lord is able. And the Bible says in verse number 12, and he arose and immediately picked up his bed, went out before them all. They were amazed and glorified God and said, we've never seen anything like this before. And I don't know about you, but when the Lord have done something in your life, you ought to have that same testimony. We've never seen him do this thing before. We've never seen things like this. And in the words of that hymn, they said, there are some things that I may not know. There are some places that I cannot go. But there's one thing I'm sure, that God is real. For I can feel him deep in my soul. Is there anybody in here tonight that's willing to get into some good trouble, some necessary trouble? Is there anybody in here tonight that could thank God that when you go to the Lord, you can understand he's a way out of no way, bread when you get hungry, water when you get thirsty. He's a rock in a weary land, shelter in the time of a storm. Ezekiel would say he's a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Job would say he's a wall house pouring in the valley. And David would say he's a battle axe in the time of a battle. And when Jeremiah was at his lowest point, he would testify he's like fire shut up in his bones. But I thank God that he's not just a miracle worker. He's not just a promise keeper. He's not just a light in the darkness. But out on a hill called Calvary, he died for you and for me. Matthew said he died. Mark said he died. Luke said he died. John said he died. Paul said he died. Pastor Todd said he died. And I said he died. But that's not how the story ends. They placed him in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. And he stayed there all day. And night Friday, he stayed there all day and night Saturday. But he got up early one Sunday morning with all power inside of his hands. And so may I ask you a question? I feel good in here, but won't he make a way for you? Won't he open doors for you? Won't he provide for you? Won't he heal your body? Won't it be your joy and sorrow? If you're glad about it, you ought to lift up those chocolate hands. Wave them like you just don't care. Ready, head back one time and say yes. Say yes. 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 Just do me a favor. I know we got to be social distant, but fist bump your neighbor and say, neighbor, be not dismayed. Whatever betide you, God will. He'll take care of you. He'll heal your body. He'll be joy in a time of sorrow. If you're glad about it, you ought to just say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Say yes. Yes. Won't he do it? Won't he take care of you? Won't he give you strength? Won't he give you joy? Won't he give you peace? If you're glad about it, say yes. Yes.